Okay, welcome to today's lunchtime devotion, Monday, 26th of July, 2021. We continue our study on 1 Corinthians as we have been doing for last week. Today we are covering the chapter of 1 Corinthians chapter 7. As we said, that 1 Corinthians is Paul's letter in response to some issues that the Corinthian church was facing. Most probably he received news either in person or by report of some of the problems that were happening in the Corinthian church. We talk about the whole area of division, whole area of lawsuits, whole area of sexual immorality among the members. So these are some issues that have been brought up, and Paul addressed them one by one. And today we continue in chapter 7, the same frame of mind, another issue, the whole area of marriage. Okay, I think that's important in this context, not only for them at that time, but for us today. Okay. Chapter 7, verse 1 says, "Now for the matters you wrote about, it's good for a man not to marry." So presumably Paul received news of the letter to highlight this issue. Okay, they're asking about marriage. It's good for a man not to marry. A lot of people think that in view of this, that Paul was not married. There's a possibility, but because technically, normally most Jews, especially a Pharisee, would marry. Okay, normally they are married, whether because of his situation, all his travels and all that, whether the wife had died, all we don't know. Okay, but some Paul here seems to imply that at present he's not married. Okay. Verse 2, "But since there's so much immorality," remember where Corinth is, the temple of Aphrodite, the temple of Apollos, where they are temple prostitutes to satisfy the physical needs of different ones who go to a temple. That's how bad the situation is in Corinth. Each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise, the wife to her husband. The wife's body does not belong to her alone, but also to her husband. In the same way, the husband's body does not belong to him alone, but also to his wife. Do not deprive each other except by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourself to prayer. Then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of a lack of self-control. I say this as a concession, not as a command. I wish that all men were as I am, but each man has his own gift from God. One has this gift, another has that. So what Paul is telling the church in Corinth in response to their question about marriage is, okay, it's okay to get married, okay, especially in the situation in Corinth, where the sexual temptation is so great and so prominent as such in the society. So it says, each man should have his own wife, and each wife their own husband. And there's a need for the husband and wife to fulfill their marital duty to one another, okay, and not withhold it for whatever reason. It says if you withhold it, then Satan can use it as a temptation, okay, and because of what's happening in society, it's so easy to give in to the temptation. So it says you need to do it, okay? And he himself says that I wish that all men were as I am. So this seems to apply that in the current state he's not married. But each man has his own gift from God. One has this gift, another. So some people are called to be not married, okay? Some people are called to marry. Either way is okay. So Paul is saying that in this first part. So it's okay to get married, and if you are married, fulfill your marital duties to one another. Okay, I think that's important for us at this first step. Then he goes on to address another issue. Now to the unmarried and the widows, I say, it's good for them to stay unmarried as I am. But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry. For it's better to marry than to burn with passion. So what he's saying is that if you are not married, okay, or even if you are a widow, especially a young widow, you want to stay unmarried by all means. But if you cannot control yourself because of temptation all around you, it's okay if you marry. Okay? It's better that you get married as such rather than be tempted into sexual sin with the temple prostitutes and all the rest. Okay, that's what Paul is saying. Verse 10, to the married, I give this command. Okay, and this bracket is very important. Not I, but the Lord. Which means that what he's saying is, this is the Lord's command, not only what I think. Okay, and Paul is very careful to say what is of the Lord's command and what is his own opinion. Okay, as you see the next verse. To the married, I give this command, not I, but the Lord. A wife must not separate from her husband, but if she does, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband. And her husband must not divorce his wife. So here he's saying that divorce is not allowed. Divorce is not allowed, okay? Although Jesus said because of your hardness of heart, if there's infidelity, adultery involved, then that can be a reason for divorce. Okay, so what Paul is saying here is that a wife must not separate from her husband. If she does, if they are separated, she must remain unmarried or else go back to her husband. Means this one shows the high standard that Paul is talking about, the whole area of marriage. A man to a woman, a lifelong commitment. I think that's important for us to remember. Okay. Verse 12 goes, it says, to the rest I say this, I, not the Lord. So he is saying that is his own opinion. It's not command from God. It's not command from the Lord. Okay. I say this, if any brother has a wife who is not a believer and she's willing to live with him, he must not divorce her. So in those cases, because of Korea is a new church, in the new church, the people have just come to know the Lord. So sometimes only one partner, the husband, come to believe in God, accept Christ. But the spouse, the wife, has not taken that step. Okay, this is the situation is. He must not divorce her. And if a woman has a husband who is not a believer and he is willing to live with her, she must not divorce him. Same thing. If the wife become a believer but the husband is not, okay, the believing partner must not divorce or separate from the spouse. For the unbelieving husband has been sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife has been sanctified through her believing husband. Now, this area of sanctification, it doesn't mean that a believing wife can, in a way, save the husband. No. What it means that because you're a believer in the relationship, you bring in the presence of God, the holiness of God, the righteousness of God into that relationship, marital relationship, or in the family relationship, because the past says, otherwise your children will be unclean. But as it is, they are holy. Because in the family, as long as one member knows the Lord and is a Christian, there's a difference in the whole family, even though the rest may yet to know Christ. So Paul is saying very clearly, okay, if one of you become a Christian, you don't separate from your spouse if they are willing to live together. Either husband, wife, or wife, husband. If you're willing to live together, you live together because you bring something into that relationship, into that family unit as such. I think that's important, okay? But if the unbeliever leaves, let him do so. So if the relationship, the husband believed, okay, accepted Christ, but the wife did not, and the wife chose to leave, or the other way around, the wife believed, but the husband, non-believer, want to leave, okay? It says that if an unbeliever leaves, let him do so. A believing man or woman is not bound in such circumstances. God has called us to live in peace. How do you know, wife, whether you will save a husband? Or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife? So in that relationship, only one partner has come to know the Lord. You as a believer don't walk out. But if the unbeliever want to break that relationship, that's up to them. Okay? So that's important for us to be very clear of what Paul is saying here. Nevertheless, verse 17, each one should retain the place in life that the Lord assigned to him and to which God has called him. This is the rule I laid down in all the churches. Was a man already circumcised when he was called? He should not become uncircumcised. Okay. Now you may wonder, if you are circumcised, how can you become uncircumcised? Okay. It seems that in that time, in the Greek culture and all that, okay, if you in some of the sports, the gym and all that, they literally exercise totally naked. Okay, if you are totally naked as a man, then whether you are circumcised or not can be seen by other people. Okay, so there have been recorded incidences where circumcised Jews, okay, try to reverse their circumcision by doing some more surgical procedure to try to cover back their foreskin. That's what's implied. Okay, so Paul is telling them, was the man already circumcised when he was called? He should not become uncircumcised. Was a man uncircumcised when he was called, became a Christian? He should not be circumcised. So circumcision is not required as such. Okay, that's important. Circumcision is nothing. Uncircumcision is nothing. Keeping God's command is what counts. Okay, so it's not a matter of external experience of a circumcision. This applies to men. Okay, but what counts is keeping God's command, obeying God is what happens. Verse 20. Each one should remain in the situation when he was in when God called him. Were you a slave when you were called? Don't let it trouble you. Although if you can gain your freedom, do so. So early church had a lot of people who were slaves. Slaves are the lowest part of society. Okay, they had no rights actually. But Paul says you are a slave, when you're a Christian, you remain a good slave. But if you can get your freedom, either the owner release the slave or the slave can buy his way out from slavery. That's also possible. Then please do so. Okay. Verse 22. For he who was a slave when he was called by the Lord is the Lord's free man. He said, although you are a slave in the world, in the eyes of the Lord, you are a free man. Similarly, he who was a free man when he was called is Christ's slave. So Paul is just saying that you are a slave in this world, but when Christ called you, you're actually free in God's eyes. And those people who are free, they are not slaves in the eyes of the world. But when you become a Christian, actually you become the slave of Christ. Okay, so he's trying to explain that situation. Verse 23, you were bought at the price. Do not become slaves of men. So it's okay to become a slave of God, of Christ, but not a slave of man. That's important. Okay, so all of us are bought with the price that Jesus paid for you at the cross of Calvary, dying for our sins. I think that's the price that God has paid, and all of us are bought with that price. We didn't buy our salvation, we didn't earn our salvation. Salvation is a free gift from God. Verse 24, brothers, each man as responsible to God should remain in the situation God called him to. Okay, so it's very important that you, as you become a Christian, remain as you are, okay, but continue to grow in Christ. I think that's important. Okay, and the early church, there are a lot of slaves, okay, who cannot get their freedom. He says, no problem, be a good slave to your master. I think that's important. Okay, then it goes on to the whole area of being a virgin. Now about virgin, I have no command from the Lord, means the Lord didn't give clear commands, but I give a judgment as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. Means he's sharing what he understands to be the rule, okay? Because of the present crisis, because in Corinth, okay, the town is so sexually immoral, so you have this problem, okay, of keeping your virginity and all that. Verse 26 goes on, I think that it's good for you to remain as you are. Are you married? Do not seek a divorce. Are you unmarried? Do not look for a wife. But you do marry, you have not sinned. And if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. But those who marry will face many trouble in this life I want you to spare you this. Now, what Paul is trying to say is that, well, you can remain single and be a good single by all means. But if you want to get married, okay, you get married, that's okay as well. But married people have different commitments, different responsibilities. And this must be seen in the context of, in the early church, as we saw in the book of Thessalonians, the early church was just waiting for Christ to come back quickly. So if Christ will come back quickly, then in this married, unmarried, just wait for a while, Christ will come back, everything will be clear, okay? That seems to be their understanding. Understanding that Christ is coming back shortly. But obviously we know by now, 2,000 years later, it still has not happened. Okay, so that's not a right thought that they had. The Thessalonians thought so Christ already come. Some people tell them Christ already come. So that's not happened yet. Okay, so just to keep that in mind. Verse 29 goes on. What I mean, brothers, is that the time is short. From now on, those who have wives should live as if they have none. Those who mourn as if they did not. Those who are happy as if they were not. Those who buy something as if it were not theirs to keep. Those who use the thing of the world as if not engrossed in them. For this world in its present form is passing away. Okay, this is what I mean. So Paul seems to, and the early church seems to this idea that Christ is coming soon. So all these things are in a way immaterial. Okay, so if you get married, live as if you are not. Okay, if you are mourning, live as if you are happy. But you buy something as if it's not yours to keep for long because Christ is coming shortly. So all these things is not important, immaterial as such. Okay, so there seems to be an idea that Paul is stating here. Obviously, on hindsight, we know that it's not right. Okay, but that's what I try to share with the church in Corinth. I would like you to be free from concern. An unmarried man is concerned about lost affair, how he can please the Lord. But a married man is concerned about the affairs of this world, how he can please his wife. And his interests are divided. An unmarried woman or virgin is concerned about lost affair. Her aim is to be devoted to the Lord in both body and spirit. But the married woman is concerned about affairs of this world, how she can please her husband. I'm saying this for your own good, not to restrict you, but that you may live in the right way in undivided devotion to the Lord. So here Paul says very clearly, which is rightly so, if you are single, you want to serve the Lord, you have all the right and all the ability to do so. Your focus is on the Lord. But if you are married, okay, either a husband or wife and all that, then you'll consider your spouse, consider the family, consider the children. And you may not be as devoted as you want to be, even to the things of the Lord. Okay, this is Paul's viewpoint, a very understanding physical viewpoint, because there are limitations if you are married. Okay, after that we can discuss some of the advantages of being married and serving the Lord together. Okay, there are many other advantages they can do in the Lord's ministry if you are married and as a family. Okay, I must add that in as well. Verse 36 says, if anyone thinks he's acting improperly towards the virgin he's engaged to. So there seems to be in the engagement relationship, sometimes they're engaged, betrothed, wait for about 6 months or a year before get married. If you're acting improperly, okay, towards the virgin you're engaged to, and if she's getting along in years and he feels he ought to marry, he should do as he wants. He is not sinning. Okay, means if you are tempted and all that, if you are going to get already engaged, might as well go ahead and get married. Okay, go and get married. He's not sinning. They should get married. But the man who has settled the matter in his own mind, under no compulsion but has control over his own will, able to control his desires, and who has made up his mind not to marry the virgin, this man also does the right thing. So it all depends on the person. Some people want to get married, okay, it's okay. Some people have decided not to get married, is also okay. So Paul is not saying that everybody should get married. He's not saying that. Paul is also not saying everybody should remain single, as some people interpret it. Okay, I think he's giving leeway to both. So then, he who marries the virgin does right, but he who does not marry her does even better. And this is the words that some people use to say, yeah, Paul is saying, don't get married. I don't think that's exactly right on what Paul is concluding. He says, because Paul's understanding is if the time is short, you want to serve the Lord, you may be more effective if you are not married and tied down with your spouse or your family. They can serve more effectively from that viewpoint. Okay, but we just know that with time that is not the right conclusion. Okay, we are here for the long haul, and 2,000 years later, we are still waiting for Christ to come back. Okay, verse 39. A woman is bound to her husband as long as he lives. But if her husband dies, she is free to marry anyone she wishes. But he must belong to the Lord. So I think this is very important. Don't miss the but part. Okay. So if you are married, okay, and the husband dies, the wife tends to outlive the husband, okay. Naturally, we know that women live longer than men, generally. Okay. So if the husband dies, she is free to marry if she wishes. But she must marry a believer, somebody who knows the Lord. He must belong to the Lord. That's what Paul is saying in the last part of verse 39. Okay? She is free to marry, but marry another believer and not somebody who does not know the Lord. Okay? In my judgment, she is happier if she stays as she is. But I think that is too, but I think that I too have the Spirit of the Lord. So it's an option. You refrain from marriage, it's also okay. You want to get married, make sure you marry somebody who also a fellow believer. I think that's important. Okay. So here, Paul addresses the whole issue of marriage. Whole issue of marriage. It's okay to get married. Okay. If you are married, you are committed to your spouse, and it's a lifelong commitment. In the early church, the problem is only one partner became a Christian. You're already married. One partner became a Christian. What do? You don't leave. The Christian partner should not leave the non-Christian partner. Unless the non-Christian partner chooses to leave. That's different again. Okay, I think that's important. And if you became a Christian, you are a slave, okay, be a good slave. But you can get your freedom by all means. If you are not a slave, you are a free man, okay? In some ways, you also become the slave of Christ. That's what Paul is saying. Circumcision, uncircumcision is not important. Okay, so don't try to undo or do something. It's not important. Just obey God, obey Christ. I think that's important. Okay, so here, Paul addresses the whole issue of marriage. To him, where you remain single to serve the Lord, because the time is short, Christ will come soon, it helps. But obviously, we think, we know from now that it's not the right conclusion. Okay, and so it's okay to get married. It's okay to stay single. Depends on what God has placed upon your heart. I think both are areas that we can serve the Lord and obey the Lord and be the Lord's servant.